Good afternoon. Welcome to a special edition ICE Leadership Roundtable webinar. We are excited to have over 100 registered attendees for today's webinar, which is eligible for 1 credit from the ACI. Today's webinar is sponsored by Summit Imaging. Summit Imaging is an ultrasound parts and transducer repair company that can quickly address specific technical needs based on a foundation of outstanding rapid customer service. Their philosophy is simple: make their customers heroes. Visit www.mysummitimaging.com for more information. Before we begin today, I'd like to announce that we have now automated the post-webinar survey and certificate process. We hope that you'll find it more convenient. The survey link will be provided today in the follow-up email, which you will receive 1 hour after the end of today's webinar. Once you have completed the survey, you will be able to download your certificate immediately. If you have any questions, please contact us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Also, I want to invite everyone to save the date for our annual ICE conference, which will be taking place in Scottsdale, Arizona from February 9 through 11. ICE 2020 will be 3 days of learning, networking, and the latest advances in diagnostic imaging technology, products, and services. More details can be found at attendice.com. All right, our panel today is comprised of imaging directors from the leading healthcare systems. Summit Imaging has provided questions for today's discussion, and we will listen in as our panel collaborates, shares best practices, and answers questions. The panel includes Mario Pistilli, Director at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, Seema Misalami, Director of Imaging Services at Las Palmas Medical Center, Kelsey Mock, Imaging Services Director for CHI St. Luke's Health Brazosport, Greg Williams, Director of Medical Imaging and Special Testing for Somerville Medical Center, and Jessica Chambers, Director Imaging, Vascular Lab Procedure, Neurodiagnostics, and Pain at SSM Health St. Joseph Hospital. Panelists, I will ask the first question and then allow time for each of you to answer in the order that you were announced. Let's begin. Is your ultrasound equipment currently supported by outsourced service contracts or in-house program or other? Mario, you can go ahead and start.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mario Pistilli. Thanks, MD Publishing and Summit, for getting such an august group together. I'm really honored to join my co-panelists. But here at CHLA for ultrasound, we have vendor service contracts. Our biomed only supports in monitoring and tracking performance of PMs. They also help us arrange the PM schedules with the vendors, but all of our service is done through vendor service contract, actually throughout imaging in addition to ultrasound.
Seema, you can go ahead and give us your answer.
Thank you. Here at Las Palmas Medical Center, we have the same as Mario's. We also have the manufacturer service or service warranty with the manufacturer.
Kelsey, you can go ahead.
We have in-house biomed that does all of our work, and if they feel like they can't do it, then we send it to the OEM. But other than that, they do all the work.
Greg, please give us your answer.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Here at Somerville Medical Center, we use OEM as our vendor for our diagnostic services. We also have biomed on site that is contracted through that same OEM vendor.
Jessica, you may go ahead.
Hello. Here at St. Joe's in St. Charles, we have in-house service, and then our biomed team, they have the ability, if they can't fix it or address the problem themselves, then they can look elsewhere. We don't contract with one individual third party. They kind of have a couple options that they can look at for the best results.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead to the second question. Mario, what are your biggest opportunities for cost containment without sacrificing quality of the equipment?
So I see quite a number of opportunities for cost containment, both in the ultrasound space and also just in imaging in general. over the past couple of years, we've tried to take advantage of a couple of those. One that we've looked at is pool coverage. So instead of covering each individual ultrasound probe or each individual radiology digital detector, we're doing pool coverage where we're doing a certain number of probes and then we draw off of that pool. So that's allowed us to shave some costs there. We also have looked over the past couple of years at all of our service contracts and the terms and conditions in terms of, does every machine really need 24/7 coverage, or are there opportunities for modalities that maybe aren't open on the weekends, or maybe ultrasound, for example. We have quite a large ultrasound fleet of 11 units, but we don't use all of those 7 days a week. And so if one goes down, we have plenty of others. So for that, we chose to decrease our coverage to not include 24/7 and weekend coverage, and we had some savings there. That allows us to preserve the quality, but also sort of shave some cost. We're also looking at sole source service options to bring all of our service under one umbrella and what the cost and risk opportunities are there. And so I'm interested to hear the rest of the panelists, any other strategies that they've used.
Seema, you can go ahead.
For us, maybe moving away from the manufacturer service organization and utilizing more of like an in-house team, because they would be able to respond quicker for service, which would allow for less downtime. So that would be a way we could maybe shave some costs there, is having more uptime rather than waiting on the manufacturers, field engineers to come out and service, or even the annual PMs that we do. We have to block off our schedule. If we had an in-house team, they could work around our patient schedule rather than us trying to block off our patient schedule to let the field engineers service our equipment or do the annual PMs or anything.
Kelsey?
With having the in-house biomed, we save quite a bit of money, because anytime that a machine goes down, we call them. They're actually in the hospital for us, and we call them, and it saves us hours and hours of time that the machine is down. And then also we are going away from all the service contracts also and just relying on biomed as the first line of defense. And then if for any reason we can't get that fixed, we call in the OEM.
Greg, please give us your answer.
Sure. So one of the biggest, opportunities that we've noticed with our current OEM contract, it seems like, specifically in the ultrasound area, that one of the primary things we have to work on are obviously damaged probes, and quite often our service contract doesn't cover the probe, so we end up using a third-party vendor to either repair it. Whoa. I'm not sure what that was.
Can you go ahead and repeat that, Greg, for us, please?
So one of the things we had noticed is that our biggest opportunity on our service contract was that coverage of our ultrasound probes. We quite often the damage that happens to those is something that is not covered by the service contract. So reducing that contract coverage and using a third party to repair or replace probes seems to be saving us a little bit of money here and there.
Thanks, Greg. And Jessica, can you please give us your answer?
Sure. And for us, I feel since we already have the in-house program, we have a lot of those benefits that were previously mentioned in terms of having someone on site readily available. I think one of our biggest opportunities is really getting that relationship with my biomed team, me working side by side with them and understanding how they impact us operationally, that it's not always about how can you save money on finding a cheaper replacement probe or finding a cheaper way to get parts, because sometimes those you cut the cost in getting those cheaper parts, but then they don't work when we go to use them, or they're subpar, not having the image quality when you go to use them. So really getting them to understand that it's twofold that if I can't operate, I'm losing money in revenue. So you may be saving money on the biomed side of things on these repair costs, but if I'm not functioning, I'm losing revenue because my room shut down or my equipment can't work. So I think it's really that relationship building with the biomed team of understanding it's okay to spend a little more and know confidently that this replacement probe or this repaired probe is going to work appropriately versus let's going through a couple of them before we finally get to the point that I can utilize it.
Thank you, Jessica. Before we move on to the third question, I'd like to remind our attendees that you can submit a question via the questions feature on our webinar dashboard. Mario, would you like to respond back to the previous question?
Yes, I had a question for my co-panelist. As we talked through this, it seems like we have an interesting mix of those of us who use in-house biomed and those of us like me that don't. And for me, there was some specific reasons why I'm not currently doing that. I'm a standalone facility and my biomed department's quite small. And so I'm struggling with whether we would have the bandwidth to handle it. For us, it would probably be only one person that would be able to do this because our group is so small. And then previous ICE sessions where we've discussed this, it seems that it's difficult to keep these people once trained. And so I'm curious to hear from the panelists that use biomed if that's been a challenge for you with having the bandwidth or losing people and how you've addressed it.
Would anyone from the panel like to chime in on Mario's question?
Sure, I can. This is Jessica. I think one thing that I vary a little bit from you is SSM Health. We're spread out over 4 states, and I'm in the St. Louis area where there's 7 hospitals. So while each of the 7 hospitals have one person dedicated to, I have one person that only does ultrasound, one person that only does CT/MRI, X-ray, et cetera. They also have the ability to borrow from our sister hospitals. My ultrasound specialist, he's been with the organization for 30 years. So luckily I don't have that turnover. And one thing I always do when I'm purchasing new equipment is I make sure I'm as reliant on them as they are on me. And this is, we're a team and we have to work together. So when I purchase new equipment, I always make sure that training on that new equipment for my biomed is included in my quotes. So it's kind of a give and take of if I'm going to buy a new piece of equipment, I need to make sure they know how to work on it. So I include that in my purchase of the equipment. So I've been fortunate enough that we can dabble in our sister facilities for help. And we do have staff with longevity here.
So if your ultrasound person is off on vacation, sick or whatever, then the biomed person from another facility comes down if you have an issue since you no longer have a service contract.
And that's how, correct. And that's how we handle call as well. They're on call, but they rotate it. So this weekend, my call person might be from my sister hospital that's 22 miles away. But they're pulling call for the whole St. Louis network. So it kind of relieves the stress of them on call as well. So we've kind of pulled our resources together internally to make sure that everyone has coverage.
Right. And that's been my barrier, having
right.
just one facility and such a small group of how we would handle that. And if we didn't have a service contract and we're only reliant on biomed.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move on to the third question. This is going to be a series of questions. What are your thoughts regarding counterfeit crystals used in repaired and replacement transducers? Do you expect to operate equipment that uses only OEM parts? And how important is quality in your decision-making process? Mario, I'll go ahead and let you start.
Well, for me personally, quality is everything. I think I'm not an ultrasound tech by trade, but I know enough to know how operator dependent it is and how equipment dependent it is, and that you can make things appear or disappear based on the equipment you're using and the skill of the operator. So I think it's hugely important that the parts are not counterfeit, certified, Also, two other points that I want to bring up that are of concern are the radiologist's comfort level. If they're not comfortable with that what they're seeing is true and accurate based on the parts used, that creates an issue. And then third, I worry about the legal risk to the organization if there was a problem encountered where we found out through using a counterfeit crystal we missed a certain diagnosis. On lots of patients, that opens us up to huge risk that be hard to justify. At least with OEM parts, you have that protection behind you of the manufacturer if there were ever discovered that there was an issue with the part. So those are my concerns with it. And I think it's difficult, and I'm curious to hear how the other panelists, if they're using third-party parts, I find it difficult for the onus to be on me to make sure the quality is there and the parts are, legal, not counterfeit. For that onus to be on me to figure out is difficult. I'm curious how others deal with all those issues.
Seema, can you please go ahead and give your answer?
So as far as dealing with or encountering counterfeit crystals used on transducers, I haven't personally had that happen here, thank God. But I did see where one facility did encounter that issue, which ultimately it led to degraded performance by compromising the image quality. So like any counterfeit, using counterfeit parts, you're running that risk of degraded performance of your equipment. And it's also compromising the safety of the equipment, which ultimately is leading to a negative impact overall on the reliability of the transducer and overall patient care as well. Like Mario mentioned, legal risk, liability, that definitely is a huge issue when dealing with counterfeit crystals used on transducers. So it can also impact any recalls for those pieces of equipment, those transducers. So definitely it can be a huge negative issue for any facility that has to deal with that. As far as operating equipment that uses only OEM parts, personally, yes, I do favor the OEM parts, and the reasons for that is because of the quality. As far as fit and function, yeah, I may be able to find the same part through a third-party vendor or company, but is it really made from the same material? It may be the same size, it may fit fine, but is it really made from the same material as the original products would be? That would be something that would be concerning to me. Also, I do like the warranty and the support that comes with OEM parts. With non-OEM parts, it can pose a threat to the warranty coverage overall, depending on the particular piece of equipment. Also, the system compatibility, that's not something I have to worry about when dealing with OEM parts because right now we know increasing use of integrated data collection to monitor and record our operating conditions, everything has to be compatible. So with OEM parts, that is not something I have to worry about. Availability, that is important, and along with durability for me. So I do prefer OEM parts. How important is quality in my decision-making process? Very important. In working in a diagnostic department, I think quality of our images, of our equipment, that is of utmost importance for us. So quality is very important to me.
Thank you, Seema. Kelsey, can you please give us your answer?
Yes, as far as the counterfeit crystals, I've never run into that issue, thank the Lord. Everything I have over here is OEM parts, and the reason for that is because our machines have to last us a good long time. It's not like we can just run out and buy a new one if for some reason we put a counterfeit probe on one of the machines and the machine blows up in our faces or anything like that. And it's all about the quality that you give your patients. If for some reason, you start going the cheaper route and the radiologists miss something or aren't satisfied, then you're basically spinning your wheels and spending more money anyway. So for me, it's always OEM parts.
Thank you, Kelsey. Greg, please give us your answer.
Sure. Okay, quality your facility is defined by its quality. So if you're not producing quality work, then that reputation gets out pretty fast. From an OEM perspective, yes, I prefer OEM parts. I think my biggest question comes if you're using a, I don't know, remanufactured part that, says it's OEM. How do you know that? We have service contracts with our OEM vendors. And so anytime I do get a part in, if I do buy it from, another probe company or something, it comes in saying it's OEM, but I do have them validate before we use the particular item that it meets the specifications, because it still has to be covered by our service contract. So that is something we have done here and have not run into any problems. I don't know that I've ever encountered a counterfeit crystal, wouldn't even know what it looks like. But yes, that's expect to use OEM. I think you have to establish a very good relationship. If you're using someone besides the OEM to purchase parts from, you better have a good relationship with that company and have faith in what they're doing. So.
Thank you, Greg. Jessica?
To kind of piggyback on what Greg said, quality is everything. That's especially in ultrasound, where ultrasound images are so subjective to your tech. It's not like a CT or an X-ray where it's going to be there. It's reliant on the tech seeing something and capturing that image. So you need to make sure you have decent transducers that's going to allow them to see what they need to see. And so I have never been aware that we have counterfeit crystals. Could we? I guess you wouldn't know until you had an issue and discovered it. So I hope that we don't. I do know that our biomed, they will use third party to look for parts sometimes. This might be the downside of having in-house, is sometimes they're looking at the cheapest route. And it kind of goes to what I said with my initial answer of my relationship with biomed is trying to get them to understand that sometimes it's okay to spend a little more knowing that we're going to have a part that works, because there has been times parts come in, doesn't fix the problem, so you start troubleshooting other problems, and then you learned that you had the right problem to begin with, you had a bad part. So I don't have the luxury of always having OEM parts, but would I prefer it? Yes. But then kind of to what the others alluded to, if it's repurposed or remanufactured, how do we know it truly is an OEM part, or it's not just claiming it is and there's other parts in there? So I do think you have to be cautious in those areas.
Thank you, Jessica. We're going to go ahead and move on to our fourth question. What are the qualities you look for in suppliers to ensure sustainable savings in high quality? Mario, go ahead and answer.
Well, there's a few things I would say, and I don't mean this as an insult to my co-panelists or anyone else, but it seems like imaging leaders are very tribal in that we all talk to each other. So I think reputation is super important. I know that's one of the first things I do is reach out to colleagues to learn who's using this company, what has their experience been, how long have they been using them. So I think to me, reputation is hugely important. Also, I like to know what their bandwidth is. So I like to learn about the company. How big are they? Where are their parts supplies located? What are their strategies if they don't have parts? And just a lot of information about the nuts and bolts of the company to feel comfortable that they'd be able to serve my needs. But I would say number one is reputation in the industry.
Thank you, Mario. Seema, please go ahead and answer.
For me, being in a location in El Paso, Texas, kind of in the corner here, the local resources is important for me. I need to make sure that they'll have enough equipment, parts available, or be able to get them quickly, have the manpower locally available here. I don't have to wait a day or two for someone to fly in from another city in order to service our equipment. So the local resources is very important for me. Along with, is the company, are the supplier financially are in a position where they can allow to take on the risk of our contract? I mean, if I have a bunch of units go down at once or tubes that burn out, is the supplier able to, are they staffed and they equip for those worst case scenarios. More importantly than that, for me, is the supplier, are the ones supplying the service to us, do they understand the core values of our company? I feel like we have to all be on the same page. We have to perform. They're seen as an extension of the hospital or medical facility. A lot of times when patients or other employees see these field engineers in the building, they just assume they are part of the hospital also. So they have to be on the same page as us as far as understanding our core values of the company. So not only fiscally sound, adequately staffed, having the proper resources locally available, but also being able to present an image that's acceptable and in line with our organization.
Thank you, Seema. Kelsey, could you please give us your answer?
Mine is they have to be knowledgeable and can get here within a reasonable time. I can't be having machines down and waiting and be like, oh yeah, well we have this third party and we're shipping it from Switzerland and it'll be in 4 weeks, and then we have to find somebody from California to come in because he's the only one that knows how to fix this. And so they have to be very reliable and very, very quick on the draw. Whenever I call them, it's anytime that I call them, it's an emergency because there's a machine down and we're losing revenue and we're making patients angry. So mine is revenue and knowledge of the machines they're working on.
Thank you, Kelsey. Greg, please give us your response.
I think Mario nailed it pretty well. It's reputation. If I'm looking at a vendor for something, I've got to know, how long they've been in the business, what kind of, what are my fellow colleagues' opinion of them. And then secondly, is the reliability. If the reliability is not there, it's a detrimental effect on what we're able to do. I'm thankful with our OEM contract that we have. We have great response. So uptime is never really my concern, but it's when you're looking at the savings side of it and you're trying to purchase something outside of maybe that contract, it has to have a good reputation.
Thank you, Greg. Jessica, you can go ahead.
Kind of a lot of what everyone else has already said, but primarily time in hospitals is very valuable. The amount of time that equipment sits unutilized, it costs us money as an organization. So I think knowing that I'm going to get quick service and things shipped out right away, and again, not coming from overseas so that it's going to delay time in getting there, and then just having the confidence that the parts we get are going to work, and that they're high quality parts that basically are going to work so I can get up and running. I think those are the qualities I look for.
Thank you, Jessica. We're going to go ahead and move on to our fifth question. In your opinion, what are the largest opportunities and risks in lowering your total cost of ownership? Mario, please go ahead and answer.
Well, there's a few that I can think of that we're exploring right now. So one opportunity is leveraging data to make decisions, and this is becoming more and more popular as vendors roll out more and more data collection. For example, in the ultrasound world, data collection around what probe is used where, how often, so you kind of know the usage of your probe fleet and can make decisions on what you can retire, replace, share, all those types of things. So I think there's huge opportunities in data analytics in providing savings. However, I would bundle that with the downside risk, which is, as imaging leaders, I think we're all struggling with just the huge amounts of information that we're expected to consume. I think many of us probably have 15 to 20 dashboards to look at, and there's no way we can consume all this data. So the risk is making that data in such a way that it's meaningful and usable and does drive decision and isn't just another thing to look at that we won't ever look at unless we had a need to go there. So that's one. I think there's opportunities as well in alternative or creative financing, meaning instead of always buying a new machine, Maybe in some situations for some systems, machine rentals make sense, or other shared models. Of course, there's downside risk of that ending up being more expensive for you, so you really have to evaluate if that makes sense or doesn't make sense. And then also for those that are in a system, which I'm not, but some are, evaluating imaging departments not as just standalones, but within the concept of a system. So if you need a new ultrasound machine, if you look across your system, is there one that's sitting underutilized somewhere else that could be relocated? So looking at that instead of always buying new. And then also over the past couple of years, we've been exploring more of upgrade paths instead of buying new, more so in MRI than ultrasound, but I think there's opportunities in ultrasound too for upgrades. So just evaluating, do I really need new or is upgrade appropriate? Of course, there's risk with upgrade in that you still have, depending on what's upgraded, you still have an old machine that you've sort of put new wheels on and made shiny again. But how long is that machine going to last compared to buying new? So weighing those decisions, which of course it's unpredictable, so there's a risk involved.
Thank you, Mario. Seema, please go ahead and answer.
I think our biggest opportunity in lowering our total cost of ownership would be extending the lives of our diagnostic imaging equipment. We do have the vendor service agreement, so a lot of times we get an end of service letter saying this piece of equipment won't be serviced anymore, and instead of trying to find maybe an independent service organization to service it, or looking at other routes, we just jump the gun and go ahead and get new equipment, replace it. So I think we could maybe save some costs there by looking at an ISO when the actual manufacturer deems it end of service life. So that could help us. Having, like I said earlier, having a dedicated in-house maintenance team, that would definitely help us lower our total cost as well with the quick response time. And then it's also shown that annual cost of service as a percentage of equipment cost for the in-house service is only 4 to 6%, whereas with the OEM support, its cost of service is actually up to about 10 to 14% of the equipment cost. So that is definitely something that could help us lower our total cost of ownership.
Thank you. Kelsey?
Having for some cost saving is having our own biomed team that's here that can work on the machines, and they're actually super brilliant and usually can figure out and actually get things up and running. Another cost saving is we are in a system at the moment, and that's kind of what we do. Like Mario said, we go out and we find different places. Like CHI has decided that some of the standalone places are going to be shut down, and we actually get the different equipment. So we have some older equipment, and we can trade them in and actually get some money for them, and then go and use one of the ones that from one of the clinics that have shut down. So we're very lucky and fortunate in that. Some of the disadvantages is that when we do go down in our biomed, we have to wait for service, and it costs hourly. So we don't have contracts with them. So it can run up a good bill if we don't know what's going on.
Thank you. Greg?
Okay, so, as I've been listening to our panelists and as we're kind of going through this, obviously my interest is piqued in the opportunity of lowering costs with the in-house biomed. Earlier in my career, I worked in a facility that was how we did things, and just from my experience with that, it seemed to work fine, but I was also not in this kind of position to see all the nuts and bolts. But the risk comes to whether you can maintain those biomed guys in-house, and what kind of support. Can you do some sort of hybrid model with some contractual support with the OEMs to kind of help back them up if it's something that's out of their hands? Because I wouldn't want to be in a position where I'm having to pay that hourly rate, because you get to that stage where you need that OEM in there that has to kind of play detective work, and those hours can accumulate pretty fast. So to me, that would be the biggest risk of having that is how do you manage that hourly risk. But sounds like a great opportunity to lower some front end costs.
Thank you. Jessica?
For us, again, we kind of leverage the fact that we're a system, and we've already kind of started on the equipment purchasing side of getting putting out RFPs and signing 2 to 3 year contracts with some of our vendors to say, across the system, we anticipate that we're going to buy 12 ultrasound units over the 4 states. So can we get the cost down to X amount of dollars? And we've done that on the equipment side. And I think although we have in-house biomed, looking at that from the parts side of things and third-party vendors, we currently aren't set up with just one third party. Our biomed have the liberty to kind of shop around and pick, and maybe if we kind of took that approach of at a system and contracting with just one organization, it might be able to help us get costs down from that perspective. So kind of taking our thought process on the equipment side and looking at it on the parts side as well.
Thank you. We are going to take a few questions from our audience. I'm going to read the question first, and then I'll open it up to our panel so anyone can go ahead and answer. Do any of you use strategic sourcing methods for parts and/or service of your equipment? If yes, has it resulted in significant savings? Anyone can go ahead and answer.
So this is Mario. We do not source parts. We're completely service contract.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to answer? Okay, we'll go ahead on to the second question. What advice do you have for a new in-house biomed imaging service manager? Anyone like to answer this one?
Go to all the training.
Oh, go ahead, Seema, you go first.
I would say developing a relationship with the staff that are actually working on the equipment. That would be important. That way they can have that relationship, feel comfortable communicating with each other. Let them know, like, hey, listen, this is what happened last time. This unit went down, and this is what you can do in the future to prevent it. So I think that would be important for the new biomed engineer to have a good relationship with the operators that are actually operating the equipment on a daily basis.
And this is Jessica. I think kind of what I alluded to earlier is really building a relationship with that imaging director as well, because since I have such a strong relationship with my biomed, when I'm putting together quotes for new equipment, I am always thinking about how can I squeeze in training for them, because it doesn't help them any if I completely change vendors on them and now they're trying to figure out how are they going to work on this. So because we have that relationship, that is top of mind. I don't only think about the technical side of training and apps training for my staff. I think of, okay, what kind of training can I get from my biomed, because it's just as important to me that they know how to work on this new piece of equipment.
This is Kelsey.
Oh, go ahead, Kelsey.
I would also look into the different machines, especially the ones that have been recently purchased. And a lot of times in the contract there will be some training that hasn't been utilized. So I know for one of my guys, our machine had been in there for 3 years and we hadn't utilized any of the biomed training, and so he got to go and learn about our linear accelerator, which we didn't even realize we had. So that'd be good to kind of look through the contracts and see if you actually had some schooling available.
Thank you, everyone. Well, did anyone else like to answer before we move on? Okay. Those of you who have in-house service teams, are they performing maintenance on MRI at any level?
Yes, mine are.
Great. Anyone else? All right, we'll go ahead and How is your organization dealing with end-of-life service devices when the OEM is no longer able to support those devices?
This is Greg. I don't mind answering that one. So with our OEM service contract, even when they send us an end of life letter, quite often we go way past that end of life letter with support. It just becomes a different rate how they support it, and there's no guarantee of uptime and parts availability, that sort of thing. So, it just puts it on our radar of where it needs to be ranked in capital planning. But we quite often go past that end of service life.
This is Mario. I agree with Greg. I have the same experience, and then we've also run some equipment even past that point to where our third-party service partners that we have some contracts with continue to support that way past end of life until we can no longer obtain parts. So we've been in situations where parts just not available anymore, and so the equipment remains down and just out of service. We've run some equipment to that point, but I agree with Greg that we run well past end of service life and we're still able to get service and support.
Thank you. Did anybody else like to go ahead and answer this question before we move on? All right. Do you have a 3 to 5 year forecast of technology needs or capital plan? Does your organization fund it effectively?
So this is Mario from CHLA. So we do have a 5-year plan, a 3 and a 5 year plan, and then we do yearly capital. Funding the equipment for me hasn't been the biggest issue. For me, it's been more the facilities costs. Some of my infrastructure is really old, and so putting in a modern piece of equipment sometimes is quite costly. So for me, that's the biggest hurdle, is not getting approval for the equipment itself, but getting approval for the entire package. And I don't know what others' experiences are.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to respond before we move on? Great. Well, any final thoughts that any of our panelists would like to share with our audience? This is open to anyone. All right. Well, we're good, guys. Thank you so much for our panel for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. Also, thank you to Summit Imaging, our sponsor for today's event. Remember, you can learn more about this company by visiting their website, mysummitimaging.com. And a reminder that we have automated the post-webinar survey and certificate process. We hope that you will find it more convenient. The survey link will be provided today in the follow-up email, which you will receive 1 hour after the end of today's webinar. Once you have completed the survey, you will be able to download your certificate immediately. If you have any questions, please contact us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Our next ICE Leadership Roundtable is scheduled for August 8th. You can tune into our ongoing webinar Wednesday series each week. For more information about our upcoming webinars, please visit webinarwednesday.live. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.